Everyone, welcome back to the Free Toastman News Pod, the show for fintech marketers and consumer lending. I'm Nick Madrid, and as always, I'm here with my co-host, co-founder, Carlos Caro. We're doing something a little bit different today. Normally we split a news story down the middle, but Carlos just put out a piece in the newsletter and an editorial that accompanied it with that I've not been able to stop thinking about, and I just have a stack of questions. So today, I'm going to play interviewer. Carlos is going to do the talking, and then here's the setup for everyone listening. The argument in the piece is that the entire job of marketing alone is about to change, not because of a new channel, nor because of a new tactic, but because the buyer changes. The claim is that consumers are going to start handling over actual decisions to AI. They'll feed an assistant their transaction data, their goals, their constraints, and then trust the machine to pick out the product. Carlos, that's the thesis. But before we get into what it means for the people listening, can you say it in your own words? Like, what is actually changing here?
Yeah, no, Nick, I think you teed it up great. I started thinking about this, and we started discussing this a few weeks back. If folks caught the episode where we shared the news that Plaid and ChatGPT were working together, and that was a major aha moment when I saw that article. I was like, I see what's going on here. The LLMs are realizing that if they have all this depth of financial context, i.e., the Plaid connection. I know what's going on in your checking account, your brokerage account, your credit cards. Now I have all the context and information to make killer personal finance decisions. Ever since I saw that, I'm starting to question things I used to do in spreadsheets, things I used to do by, um, on napkins. Like, this should all be delegated to LLMs. I'm sure consumers are going to figure this out, but let me give you a little bit more. So back to the thing you framed up, the marketers, I think, that listen to our show, that the work I've done in the past, it was always around convincing a human that showed up on our landing page to take some kind of action. And I remember obsessing over things like, did we write this claim the right way? Is it about saving money? Is it about the monthly payment? Like, there was all these things and all these debates we would have internally. This stuff's just going to get super, super rational with the LLMs. The consumer's going to show up and say, hey, LLM, invoke my Plaid data. Boom. That's going to happen in like the snap of a finger. Then the consumer's going to say, look, I just lost my job and my monthly payment on my debt needs to be $800, not $1,000. And I need that to be true for the next 12 months. Make it happen. And then it's going to go run off and do math and like put all this stuff together. It will recommend products, and it's going to be making all the right, like, rational decisions. So I do think the buyer in a lot of ways flips from the human to the bot. And I do think financial services is unique in this regard, because a lot of the things I imagine people want to do in financial services are ultimately like math problems. It's like, how do I get the best price of debt? How do I earn the most on rewards? They're typically not emotional decisions, although I'm gonna adjust that answer in a bit. But I think overall I'm leaning more rational is where the world is moving. So these humans are going to get nudged by a trust badge or a clever headline. I think you're going to really have to earn the transaction. But I think the key insight for a CMO right now is like the buyer's changing. And I think, and we're going to have a couple years to internalize that, I think.
It's so true. And like, I was just talking to a good friend of mine, ex-CTO, who's explored the space a bit. And we were talking about a different startup about agents buying things and buying like shoes or something fun. He's like, no one's going to do that because people actually love buying things. But the biggest caveat is no one ever says, man, I'm really glad I just bought this loan. Like, that's just, there's no excitement in that. So I'm bullish on the agent buying things like loans, very practical, very data driven, and leave the shoe buying to actual human. Okay. Here's my first question. And I think a lot of marketers are having the same thing. Does this blow up the funnel? Do awareness, consideration, application, approval, funding still mean anything if a bot is doing the shopping?
Yeah, no, I think the funnel remains. So, I mean, the typical funnel marketers think about, you have your your awareness, your consideration, and then your transaction stages. Um, I think it's all more or less the same stuff, but now we're talking in like the language of the AI, right? So does your LLM acknowledge that your product exists? So it's like the LLM's awareness of your product, not so much the human. And that's going to be a technical problem, right? Do you have the right API into Claude and into all the other LLMs? That'll be a question mark. Um, will the LLMs be motivated to share that awareness with the customer? So I do think it's the same funnel. So I can imagine the same type of dashboards, but rather than going out and surveying humans, we have, I don't know, maybe there will be a way to survey the LLMs on stuff like this. I'm sure there will be research organizations that will make it their job to invoke all sorts of queries on all sorts of product types, and will come back to each brand and say, hey, here's this LLM's awareness of your stuff is 20% and this LLM's is 30, and much in the way marketers used to play the SEO game. There'll be some people are calling it GEO, but some game to kind of make sure that you exist in the LLM world. Where I start to think it gets more interesting here, though, for lenders specifically, once you get past the awareness stage, consideration I think is a really interesting one. Um, and the world where we design like 1% cashback products for the masses, I think those days are gone, right? Because the 1% cashback product was designed to be perfect for no one, but like pretty good for almost everyone. And in this setup, like you need to be amazing for one person. That's what kind of hits in LLMs. And we'll get back to this because as we were doing our prep, Nick, you said, "Hey, like what should CMOs absolutely be doing?" So I have a specific suggestion, and it's going to touch on like niche products and how to think about that. But I think there's going to be just a giant revival in niche products for that reason, because you don't have to be the okay match for the masses; you have to be the best match for the specific user. And AI fortunately enables like this kind of stuff at scale. So I think that's really interesting. And look, I think the back to the kind of the headline point here. As you go down the funnel, applying for the product, it's no longer a human; it's a machine. So what the form looks like, how many fields, how it's laid out, is it mobile optimized? It's irrelevant now because it's two APIs talking to each other. But APIs still have a user interface. What data was the LLM sending to the bank? What happens if some of the data was missing? Does that create a user prompt? Or does that create a call out to a third-party API so that the user has like a really great experience? And now a risk team has to weigh in and say, well, I want the user experience to be clean, but when it's clean and it's frictionless, I have to compromise the quality of the data because they're not providing it, some third party is providing it, and there's a higher error rate. And so like there's all these really interesting questions that um, effectively start to balance out ease of use and low friction against quality of decision, both from a fraud and a credit risk perspective. But the constituent buyer isn't a human; it's a bot. So I think it really has to rewire how marketers are thinking about this.
That's a pretty optimistic read on that, I think. And so if the metrics survive that we're traditionally accustomed to talking to, like where does the actual work move? Like what is the new lever that we all can pull to drive what we want?
I think a big one is going to be around the product library. So we talked a little about that at a high level, but um, how many tools are you giving the LLM to pull from? So if you have a two credit card like library, that's all the products that you have. I think you'll inherently be at a disadvantage to the AI first lender that decided from day one they're going to offer 3,000 products, because there's little nuances and little variations that appeal to specific small segments. So I think just product library now is a big advantage. Um, in the old world, a big product library I think was a monster disadvantage because you'd have all the ops baggage behind that, and it would be hard to communicate to the users who should pick what. Like the LLMs are going to do a killer job matching user needs to products. So you don't have to worry about that anymore as a marketer. You can just put out great stuff for niche segments and like let the bots do their job. So I think that is one lever, Nick, that we probably haven't we didn't talk about enough in the piece we published this week. But I'd like to go there and maybe expand on that in coming weeks. Um, the one we did talk about in the article, which I do think is worth mentioning, is the whole balance between information depth and certainty and ease of use. Again, like let's create the analogy to an application, right? So in the old world, in today's world, I have to wrestle with the question of how much information do I ask from the customer? Do I ask for a W-2? Do I ask for a tax form? Do I ask for I've seen lenders go as far. I actually saw a card application this week that required the customer to enter their phone number. They received a one-time password and they authenticate for like fraud and identity reasons. So like, there's always these trade-offs these lenders face, and the general rule is the more you ask, the better your fraud and risk decisions. I think that seems somewhat obvious. The hard part is what's the right balance between asking for information and having high quality decisions. And in the LLM context, what it's going to look like is like, are you good with the information Plaid just kicked over through, or GPT clicked over through Plaid? Or are you going to interrupt the session and tell the user, hey, look, I really want to get you this product, but you need to go find this PDF and upload it, and you need this user password for this other. Like, do you really want to do that? Because your conversion rate might have been 100% had you just let the ball roll down the hill. But as soon as you intervene, now like you're creating friction. The risk teams are always going to tell you to get more data because they're going to do their jobs better. But the marketers are going to, I think that it's the marketers that are going to struggle with like the balance. So I think this is going to be a pivotal conversation in almost every lending business.
Cool. Let's take a pause. Quick thanks to our this week's sponsor, Fintel Connect. And here's the stat that fits this episode a little too well. 56% of US banks and credit union executives still build their marketing budgets off of last year's numbers. That's from research out of Cornerstone Advisors and Fintel Connect. And look, it feels practical, but it's exactly how growth teams end up overfunding the channels that already peaked, underfunding the ones that are actually working, and walking into budget season with no real cost per outcome model. Fintel Connect's latest mini guide, Why Financial Market Budgets Still Start with the Last Year's Numbers, walks through how to shift from legacy budget planning to an outcome-based model built around measurable acquisition impact. Funded accounts, loans, deposits, long-term customer value. If you want to tie every marketing dollar back to the acquisition impact, grab the guide. The link is in the show notes. It's linked to our news edition this week. Okay, Carlos, let's get back to it. So if the machine ignores the emotional stuff, the badges, the copy, does that mean that brand marketing is dead? Because that's the scary conclusion for maybe some of the people listening.
Yeah. No, I was, as I kicked off my piece and as we've been talking through this, I know I've leaned in a lot on everything. The bots are going to be really, really rational. And I actually think that's the reality. If without a human intervention, so like if I showed up to Claude and I said, here's my spend data, Claude, find me the credit card that maximizes my rewards points. If that was my prompt, I'm quite certain Claude or whatever LLM is going to be the winner for personal finance decisions is going to be relatively ruthless as it pertains to like the brand. They're not going to care about that. Like they're going to solve my question, which is the user wants to maximize rewards points. Like what's the credit card? It's not going to care about the brand. So in that world where people are generating what I'm going to say unbranded prompts, the brand is off to the side. It's all about the nuts and bolts of the product and the offer. And I think that's where the niche offering of like the 30,000 products could really be really strong. But like the world doesn't work that way. I know as I think about my credit card usage, some of the moments I remember most are like traveling overseas and my card gets declined and I'm like, shit, I need to like pay for a train ticket. Like there's a moment where you really need this thing to go through. And in that moment, when you call the customer service number, you want great service. You want it to get resolved. You want it to be easy. And in my mind, the best in class for that is Amex. They're fantastic. Every time I've called Amex, they're easy, they're fast, they treat me well. I don't have to be on hold for half an hour. So I lean heavily on cards I trust. Amex is one of kind of the brands I trust. So if I were to do that query I just talked about of maximize my rewards points, the way I would phrase it is show me the best Amex product for my spend. But then also find me maybe the second. Like find me another option that isn't Amex. And then I'm going to have to weigh, do I want to risk this fintech I've never heard of that gets me $20 more in rewards? But the Amex card, maybe it's a little not as rich on rewards, but man, I trust them. I know they're solid. They're not going to leave me hanging in a tough moment. That would swing my decision. But that was me, the user, invoking the brand into my query. And that's where I think the game's going to be, is making sure your brand like shows up in these prompts. And I really don't see any shortcuts to that. I think there's going to be a lot of hard work leading up to that.
So just a summary, opposite is true. Brand is increasingly important in this LLM driven world. So that actually leads to another question. I think, some execs are asking, I've talked to people who have also broached it with me. Should I just build the super app, right? If that AI surface is where the decision happens, why wouldn't a big lender want to own it? And just quick caveat, we also reported in our news this week that SoFi recently launched 2 AI individual products. One for just financial coaching and another one for investing. So like in my mind, SoFi is almost trying to own that AI interface within their app versus a chat GPT kind of interface. So I think this is actually a real question that's coming to mind. Yeah. What do you think?
I mean, SoFi is a unique case. So I'm gonna park SoFi here for a second. I think most brands, would be ill-advised to try to build this themselves. And the tangible example I'll just mention, because I think it fits the conversation. If you think about what Credit Karma built over the last 19 years, how many banks do you think tried to copy something like Credit Karma? Nick, I know you follow the space a little bit, but give me a number. How many banks do you think tried to build a Credit Karma like?
I don't know. So how many banks are there? Like thousands and thousands of banks.
Oh, well, let's just talk about maybe the big banks, like the top 10. How many do you think?
Let's say 9.
Yeah, it's probably closer to 9 than to 0. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but I saw a lot of these Credit Karma features and services where the bank would show up and knock on your door and say, "Hey, I have your free score," and show up. And then I think part of the monetization model idea was that they could distribute other products and services, including potentially competitive products and services in some cases. I don't think, as far as I'm aware, and I don't think the big banks report on this publicly and deliberately, but I never saw any of them really get anywhere close to what Karma built. And I think a big part of that reason is just Karma's independence as a technology company, right? So I think consumers were clear from day one that Karma doesn't issue the cards. They don't have a horse in the race of who you pick. They just want to give you transparency into the choice, give you the pros and cons, let you make your own decision. I think that's a big deal here when we talk about LLMs, because in my mind, people go to LLMs for this ruthless objectivity. And if I feel like the bot is built by a big name brand who offers said product, I'm inherently just gonna distrust it. So I don't think, whether it's SoFi or whether it's pick your favorite, household name bank, I doubt they're going to be the winner in this category. The winner in the category may say something like backed by or in partnership with, and they might name 20 big brands that people trust, because the consumer needs to trust the entity with their financial. So I could see that maybe going down. But as far as the entity that runs it end to end, the consumer facing brand, I think it's going to be probably someone we've actually never heard of today. If I had to venture a guess, because every new wave of technology comes with disruptions. The incumbents rarely are able to disrupt themselves and follow the next wave. So if I were to bet what's going to happen here, it'll be some brand we've never heard of from some company we've never heard of that's going to end up dominating this in like 10 years. But it's going to be bumpy waters until we get there.
Cool. Let me be skeptic for a second, because I think the whole picture of this rests on a big assumption that consumers will actually hand an AI the keys to their bank and credit bureau, right? It's a lot of trust. Why are you so confident that they're going to do that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, to be very clear, I'm not confident they'll give it to ChatGPT or Claude. I'll just put that out there. I personally have a lot of anxiety with that because if when I query Claude about, I'll give you a tactical example, Nick, just to illustrate it. A trip I'm going to do in the summer that has nothing to do with NMG. It has nothing to do with Free Toaster. It's just purely a fun trip in the summer with my kids. It starts mentioning, well, you might want to consider doing this because NMG does that, and you may want to consider this because it starts invoking context that it knows about me in situations where I actually don't think it's relevant. And so I start to worry about how the data is going to start to get used, right? So if I'm considering handing over all my checking data and credit card data, yes, there's a lot of utility within the microcosm of what credit card I pick, but there's a lot of information I don't necessarily want a corporate entity to know about me. So like there's a privacy concern, I think. There, like, will it be sold to marketers? Am I going to start getting spammed? Who knows? Like, this information could be abused in a lot of ways. And I'm just not of the mindset that like Anthropic or Claude or any of these companies are um, thinking that thoughtfully and that carefully about financial data yet. I do think they'll get there, but I'm personally quite nervous. Um, but back to your question, do I think it'll happen? Yes. I mean, Mint, this was a company that Intuit ended up buying years ago. I was doing some internet research. Apparently, they hit 20 million registered users. So this was like the Plaid of the day. You know, this was probably like 2008, 2009. There was a company called Yodely that was on the back end. But it's the same idea. You put your username and your password, and we'll download all your transaction data, and like we'll present it to you in really interesting ways. 20 million people trusted that in 2008. And the utility of that was like, it was literally like, let me paint for you a dashboard of how much you spent month to month, how much you spent in each category. It was pretty rudimentary stuff. Compared to what the LLMs can do today, it's like nothing. So if 20 million people would trust it in that context, I think 2 billion people would trust an LLM, and like just given the use cases today. No, so I have no doubt people will get there. It's the question to me is like, what entity will earn that right? And will that take 5 years to come around? Will it take 10? That's harder to say, but I'm more on the time. I think we're going to find a super app like this probably in the next 2 years that gets north of 5 million users. That's my gut.
And there's a lot of wrappers on top of these foundational LLMs too. So there's probably some consumer facing startups that are going to own that relationship and invoke that trust while using the underlying LLMs underneath. And so there'll be exposure even beyond the direct exposure to like a Claude or ChatGPT. Okay, so if you're a marketing leader listening to this, and if you believe even half of what we're talking about, like what is the one move that you should think about making this quarter?
I'm gonna go with three here. I think in a written piece, maybe I focused on one. As we've talked this through and as I've thought about it more, I think there's three key ones. One I'll reiterate is like the product library. I think has to be a much bigger part of the CMO's job. So most CMOs at banks are used to working with, call it 2 to 5 products, like really hero products that do most of the revenue. I think we need to start talking in like the hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of products, just because you want to be unequivocally the best for that specific case. Even if you're not, the LLM may overlook you. So that's number one. Number two is investing in brands. I just see so many brands that are addicted to the channel arbitrages. So buying a click from Google at $1 that they think is worth $2, buying a click from Meta that they think is for $1. They like all this kind of performance marketing is what people normally call it. But this is the math of marketing, and I think because consumer lenders are so analytical, they love this arbitrage stuff. They love geeking out on the ROI of this channel and this keyword and stuff like that, and that's great and that's important. But I actually think in a lot of ways LLMs are kind of killing all this stuff. Like if they do their jobs well, consumers are going to realize, wow, Google and Meta and all this stuff I've been paying attention to was like funded by media dollar. Not to say the new world is not going to be funded by media dollar. That may never change. But I do think we get more rational. I do think we get more meticulous in the LLM context. So I think we're going to have to earn more of our business, and then just brand is going to be more important there. So that I think the two takeaways on the brand side. One is you may need to invest in marketing teams that can think beyond math. Like how do you build a brand? How do you tell a story? How do you narrate? How do you shoot compelling video? How do you write compelling copy in all these social platforms? That's going to get way more important, because if your brand can land in the prompt, you have an inherent advantage over everybody else. If your brand doesn't land in the prompt, I think you're going to be just commoditized, right? So your margins are going to go down. All sorts of bad things happen there. So those would be the two things. Invest in the brand marketing side, which many lenders just don't spend any dollars at all today. So that would be a concern for me as a CMO, and then the team composition.
Let's go back real quick to the number of products, because I just brought it up. On October 17th, 2024, you wrote an editorial, The Case for Building Hyper Niche Lending Products. Let's just commit to, I'll put this in the show notes this week. Maybe we revisit this in the next week or two, because it's so relevant and I think it's so interesting.
Yeah, no, it really is.
If we're pushing teams to have more product lines, like that sounds crazy. So let's try to maybe demystify that. So
yeah, no, it is crazy. I don't remember the specific number offhand, but I remember for that piece, I looked into how many cards were listed on Credit Karma at the time, like in total across all the brands. And I think it was like 300 something cards. Total across the whole ecosystem, 300 cards. And I think I just said maybe a lender should have hundreds, if not thousands, of cards within their brand, right? So yeah, I do think it's time to revise that piece. I think it's pretty obvious the case just got stronger for niche products. What's interesting though is I don't see that yet happening. As I talk to fintechs and as I talk to new entrants in the space, I definitely see innovation on like product constructs and things like that. But I've yet to see the company that showed up and said, "Look, our thesis is around an audience, and if we have to design 300 products or 1,000 products to serve that audience well, we're going to do it." I don't see anybody leaning in there strategically yet. And there's probably some really good operational reasons for that, but on the strategy side, this still seems pretty wide open. So I think it'll be interesting to follow.
Your long-term memory is not that bad. 331.
Okay, there we go.
The exact number. so pretty good.
And that number's probably gone up. Maybe it's at 400 now, but I think we're still talking, modest numbers in comparison to what's possible.
Let's commit to revisiting that piece and that number. Okay, so last big one. Do I need to go kill my legacy channels tomorrow? The mail, the paid search, all of it? Or not? Is there some nuance there? What do I do?
Yeah, no, I think I've been working with lenders last 3 years very closely. I've been looking at their marketing mixes. Very little has changed at the top line. So if your head has been buried in the sand for the last 3 years and you didn't know Claude and ChatGPT existed and you were just running your business like it was 2018, you would be fine so far through like June 2026. I think that story is going to start changing faster, and it's going to accelerate over the next several years. Again, for the primary reason that there's just so much utility in this use case. when I start seeing ChatGPT and Plaid doing strategic partnerships, I know exactly what they're thinking and I see the value for the consumer. It's very obvious to me. Um, what I don't know is like, will that take shape over 5 years, 10 years, 2 years? It's hard to say, but so the good news, I think lenders have some time to adjust here. But like we're seeing the channel that's been impacted the most so far has been search. So when I and we've covered NerdWallet, so I think Nick, this probably resonates with you. But like their card business is down 50% from the peak because they were so SEO driven. And when every company that used to be connected to SEO tries to get into paid search, guess what happens to paid search? It gets way competitive. The CPCs rise, the ROIs drop. So that channel's tough today. That's definitely been like the one I think has been most negatively impacted. But then we're going to start to see the dominoes fall. Like at some point, this may impact social. This may impact affiliates. This may, I mean, affiliates in particular, I think are at risk here because you compare the use case of going to a list page like NerdWallet where you have 20 products listed and you have to compare them all to a one-line prompt that makes the decision for you in 10 seconds. It's pretty obvious where the consumer value is in that context. So like, will NerdWallet pivot to be an LLM-based engine? Maybe it's possible. Or will someone else come in there AI native and do it better? Like those are the kinds of things that are going to shake out over the next couple of years. So it'll be fun to watch. But yeah, I wouldn't be in a panic over any of this quite yet.
Cool. And I think for me, my big takeaway is, the elegance of all this is that there's no trick to it, but you just have to have the best offer. Like,
No, that's it.
it sounds so simple, but like that's what's going to win here. And so it leans into your niche thesis. It's being more niche in what you're offering, being able to meet the customer in the right way. Like that's what wins here.
No, I love that framing because as marketers, we're trained to convince someone you're the best without actually being the best often. And in this new paradigm, I think we're imagining here, probably in more cases than not, you actually have to be the best to win the business. So, no, but I mean, good news here for consumers. I think things get really good or better for consumers as far as choice and the effort it takes to find the right products. For lenders, I think it's going to get more cutthroat. So we'll see if that means consolidation or what that does to the industry. But next 10 years are going to be fun.
Cool. Well, you and I have young kids at home, so that's what's keeping us up at night. But if what we've talked about is keeping you all up at night, it's exactly why we're building the room around our September 23rd summit. It's the Affiliate Marketing Summit for Lenders, sponsored by Experian and Engine by Gen. You know what happens to search, who's native to what comes next, and what does it mean to the buyer when the buyer is a machine. It's a small, curated room. Early bird pricing ends in late July. Seats are genuinely limited. It goes through us as an approval process. There's a registration link in the show notes and in the newsletter. Would love to have you join us.
Yeah, Nick, one more thing I'll mention about the event. I mentioned to you earlier this week, but we've put together a day 2 where all we're doing is we're going out to Sonoma. We're bringing 50 people out there. And the idea is structured and unstructured networking, but no presentations, no fireside chats, no panels, just 5 hours in wine country, having lunch, having a little bit of wine, having some good conversations. We're almost full on that event already. I think we have a handful of seats. So if that particular part of the event is compelling, I would sign up now because I think within the next week or two, we're probably going to pull down registration for day 2 until we let things really shake out. Maybe we can get a few more seats from the Vineyard, Nick. I don't know, but I'm personally really excited about day 2, and if others in our audience are as well, I don't want them to miss out.
Totally. It's one of my favorite vineyards. It's not pretentious. It's beautiful, amazing wine. We have barrel room walkthroughs. We have vineyard walkthroughs. So it's like a little active as well. Good food. There's also Wi-Fi on the bus. It makes sense. I'm excited for it. Okay. So if this useful was episode, please forward it to one colleague, one friend. That's how the toaster grows. Carlos, you were in the hot seat today. I'm going to let you off. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was great. We'll see you next week.
All right, chill it. Bye.